Hey there, welcome. Good to have you with me this afternoon. Thanks for making time to join me for this mini class. I really appreciate it. Just want to take a moment to remind you if you're watching this on the replay, or those of you who are with me live, if you decide to go back and watch it, please remember to like the video, subscribe to my channel, drop a comment, share it with a friend. All of those things help to make my channel more visible, and I really appreciate you helping me get iridology out there into the real world. Thanks for that. All right, just want to also remind you to grab a piece of paper and a pen, or however you want to take notes. When I say grab a piece of paper and a pen, it makes me sound so old school. But that's still how I prefer taking notes because I am not great on a keyboard. So go ahead and do that. And you'll find that if you can make notes, it'll help you to focus on what we're doing, and it'll help you come up with better questions as well. Quick introduction of myself. My name is Judith Cobb. I've been studying holistic health since the late 1970s. That might be older than some of you. And I've been coaching and teaching holistic health since the early 1980s. I'm a master herbalist, natural nutrition clinical practitioner, and a level 3 certified instructor with the International Iridology Practitioners Association. My calling in life, besides doing clinical work, this is actually my clinic room, is to teach health professionals how to use iridology to assess their clients quickly and accurately while developing deep rapport and enhancing client care and eliminating unpaid report writing time. So important. And I've come to that honestly because my original training in iridology over 4 decades ago was very strictly Jensenian. How many of you have heard of Bernard Jensen? If you have, drop a comment, do the raise hand icon, let me know, whatever. Just let me make sure I've got this. There we go. You should all be able to say something now. There we go. Have you heard of Bernard Jensen? Let me know. Just give me a yes in the comments box. Carol's heard of him? Great. Thanks for that, Carol. Anybody else heard of him? Okay. And so that was my training. And I don't want you to get me wrong. I love that that was where I started. Iridology has come so far since then that I've had to leave the Jensen training behind and basically unlearn and relearn everything. About 35 years ago, I was getting frustrated that the Jensen iridology wasn't working the way I was taught it would work. And that's when I was blessed to be able to learn constitutional. And so what I discovered in doing Jensen is that it was actually taking me longer to work with my clients than if I didn't have iridology. I had been taught to do this really detailed, pull everything apart assessment, give my clients a big written report. And the challenge with that was it was taking a lot of my time. And I wasn't getting paid for that time. I have bills to pay too, just like everybody else, right? So it's important that when I'm working, I'm getting paid. The other thing that I discovered was that my clients were getting results. They were feeling better, but their eyes weren't changing the way I'd been taught they would. So that was really frustrating. When I learned constitutional iridology, that helped me figure out a way where I could do the iris assessment in my client time without writing a lengthy report, give my clients the information they needed in that moment, and help me build their protocols right then and there. It began to be a real time saver for me. And it also helped me to work deeper with my clients and get even better results for them. And that's what was really exciting to me. In order to do that well, I had to figure out how to do an iris assessment. I had all the bits and pieces. I knew all the different markings. I knew how they worked. I knew anatomy and physiology. I had all of that, but I had to figure out a system, an order in which I needed to do things to be able to accomplish this mission of getting an iris assessment done quickly and succinctly and in a way that would be a benefit to my client. So today, that is exactly what I'm going to share with you, is the process of what I call layering up information. What's the first thing I do, the second, third, fourth? I think there's 7 steps in total. I've never counted them. That's silly. I should count them, right? Somebody count them while we do them today. All righty. So here we go. We're only going to be looking at one client's set of eyes in this mini class because that's how you're going to see the process. So this is a client of mine, and she is in her mid 50s, early 60s. And so as we look at her eyes, I want to know from you, sorry, I just got distracted there for a moment, just a little bit of a brain jog. What background do you have in health? Are you a registered nurse? Are you a massage therapist? Are you a master herbalist? Are you a nutrition consultant? What background do you have? That's going to help me know where I need to go with this. And if you've got iridology training, I also want to know then, what training do you have? Is it Jensen? Is it John Miles? Is it Andrews? Is it Miller? Is it Morse? Is it something else that I'm not familiar with? Maybe there's probably lots of that out there too. I'd love to know what that background is, because that will also tell me what language I need to be using as I present this for you. Okay. And Carol says me. Thank you, Carol. Thank you. And she's one of my recent graduates of my course. So this is very exciting. All right, well, let's get on with this. Everybody else is being shy. You're going to get more out of me if you play in my sandbox. I promise you. That means drop comments in there. So we've got a female, early 60s. We're going to call her LB. These are the specific steps to do in an iris assessment if we want to do it quickly, and I call these layers. First off, we must have at least a basic personal and family history to give context to what we see in the eyes. This is critical. The eyes are not a crystal ball. They don't tell us exactly what's going on, but they help us to understand what the client's symptoms are and help us to understand what questions we need to ask and what protocols we need to create. So this is the first layer of information we need. In Jensen, I was taught to not ask about the history or health goals. I was just taught to start looking at the eyes and start picking things apart. So I would have focused on this, on this, on this, on this. Each one of these things would have had meaning, would have been something wrong with this client right now. I'd have been telling this client that, oh my goodness, they were in horrible shape, right? And this along the edge here. Every one of these things in my original Jensen training was a pathological problem that was happening right now. You can see why that would take a long time. You can also see why it would mean, I just need to make sure I did unmute myself. Okay. Why it would mean that clients could get easily overwhelmed, because we're picking out all these ideas and we're not tying them together. We're just grabbing markers and not going in any specific direction. So after about 10 years, of course, I gave that up because it wasn't working well. So here's what these eyes show us. Eyes show us inherent predispositions. Think of this as epigenetics. How many of you have heard the term epigenetics? If you have, just do the raise hand icon or let me know, put EPI, epi, in the chat box. Carol's heard of epigenetics. Okay. So epigenetics means that we've got genes that we can turn on, we can turn off, depending on what we do, right? We can do supplements to turn certain ones on. We can do supplements to turn certain ones off. We can change our diet. We can do all kinds of things to change our epigenes, how our epigenetics manifest. So everyone has these genes, whether they're turned on or turned off. And so when I look at the eyes, I see where the epigenes are. I don't know exactly what they will do, but I see the areas of the body in the eye. And then with the client's symptoms, I understand what's been turned on and what's been turned off. Whether each marking is going to have a symptom or not, we won't know till we look at the eye and talk to the person. And we hope that each of these areas does not have its own standalone symptom. That would be pretty overwhelming and actually pretty darn devastating as well. But these iroids do show us which areas want to misbehave if they're not well cared for. But they're not showing us what is not misbehaving right now. That's what the symptoms tell us. Does that make sense? The symptoms tell us what is out of balance now. The eyes explain why and how. Does that make sense? Give me a yes if that makes sense. All right. Thank you, Carol. I appreciate that you're playing with me in this, Carol. So her symptoms, she has a history of lymphatic swelling that was difficult to resolve rather. She has irritable bowel syndrome. That was a doctor's diagnosis, not mine. She also has a doctor's diagnosis of candida. She's got a lot of stressful family dynamics going on that have been problematic for a few years with no immediate sign of abating or resolving. She always feels exhausted and wants to feel joy and have energy to do the day. This is why she came to me. Her labs, her cholesterol was elevated at 5.92. The highest normal should be 5.15. Her LDL was elevated at 3.72. We want that under 3.34. Those of you who are in the US, you will measure these in different units. In Canada, these are the units we're using. Her hemoglobin A1C was good. It was at 5.1, and we want it under 5.7, so she's good. Her diet was pretty good. I had to give her credit for that, but there's always room for improvement, right? You might want to write her diet down in a few minutes because I'm going to ask you what you think of it. So take a moment as I'm doing this and just shorthand this down. She started her day with 2 mugs of lemon water. She followed that with a cup of coffee. And then she would have a green smoothie, which was built on a plant-based protein shake powder. Lunch was usually some kind of chicken, quinoa, or hummus, a Greek salad, and maybe some cooked vegetables. Her evening meal was usually fish, salmon was very common, or some other animal protein and more veggies. In the evening, she would often snack on fresh blueberries. She enjoyed homemade soup. She consumed minimal dairy and very minimal grain and bread products. So what do you think of her diet? Does that sound pretty good? Let me know in the chat. But does that sound like at least a relatively healthy diet? I mean, it's not Twinkies and Coca-Cola, right? So what do you think? Let me know if you think her diet was good or Carol says yes, but not the coffee. Okay, good comment, but not the coffee. Anyone else have any input on that? What do you think of her diet? While you're putting things in there, she'd never had any surgeries and she was not on any medications. That's really remarkable for someone in her early 60s, right? Most people by the time they're 60, they're on at least blood pressure and cholesterol meds. Now, her cholesterol was up there, so if she'd let her doctor give her meds, she would have been medicated on at least a couple. She had been using supplements for many years and typically chose better brands over the big box cheap brands. So that's the first layer. We needed to know what her symptoms were, what she wanted help with, and what her diet was. That's layer number 1. That is the framework that we are going to use to assess her eyes. Would also need more protein and green and leafy vegetables. Oh, Carol, love that. Yes, 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 yes. Layer number 2, we need to start making note of some foundational iridology information. So let's do that now. Here we need to determine what her primary constitution is. Now, if you've been with me for a while, you've probably seen the mini class on the 3 constitutions. If you haven't seen that one yet, I'll post a link to it in the chat. So if you haven't seen that one, I believe that is the link. You want to go back to it. So to determine the primary constitution, we need to see what color this eye is, and it's blue, right? So blue puts her into the lymphatic constitution. If she had brown eyes, true brown eyes, they would be hematogenic. If she had hazel eyes, that would be biliary. Each constitutional type or eye color has its own metabolic tendencies. Almost everything else we do is going to rest on this foundation of her primary constitution. She falls into the lymphatic constitution, so immediately we know she has a tendency to be over acid in her tissues and her blood. We also know she'll have predispositions towards lymphatic congestion. So let's begin integrating what you already know about anatomy and physiology and symptomatology. So let me know in the chat box. If someone is over acid systemically, I'm not talking stomach acid. If she was over acid in her stomach, she would not be over acid in her tissues. If she's under acid in her stomach, she will be over acid in her tissues. So what would be some symptoms we might see in someone who was over acid in their tissues? Give you a minute to think that one through. What are some symptoms we might see if someone was running over acid. And Carol says, ask. Well done, Carol. That's one of the little reminder tips I give my students. We'll talk about it in a moment. Anyone else have any other ideas? Asthma, allergy, skin, kidney, and there's one more. Carol, there's 3 A's. I can push her just a little because she's got it. She's got it. Any others? Arthritis, yay, well done. What do those 3 things have in common? They all have elevated acid, right? Acid equals mucus. Mucus equals acid. They are interchangeable terms. So a question we would want to ask her is, are you aware of any inflammation in your body or excess mucus production? Was her sinuses congested? Were her ears always plugged? Did she always feel like she had mucus running down her throat? Did she have mucus in her bowel movements? Any stiff joints, any itises? Any kind of an itis is always an inflammatory process, right? Oh, there's the link again to the three constitutions video. All right. So with that, then layer number 3. We need to know her subtype by color. This is also called her constitutional subtype. Now, there are several subtypes by color, and an iris can have more than one, or it might not have any. The choices in this layer of information are determined by the primary constitution. So we've got that lymphatic constitution. Then there are some subtypes that fall under that. There's biliary, there are some subtypes that fall under that, and there's hematogenic, there are some subtypes that fall under that. And so over in this one, her primary constitution again is lymphatic. And with this lymphatic constitution, we have choices of things like over acid, uric acid, scurfrim, hydrogenoid, febrile. In this particular case, we've got some over acid, and the colorations that we've got in these areas tell us we have some uric acid as well. We have a tiny touch of a scurfrim, okay? And we've got a bit of hydrogenoid. So those are our subtypes for this person. Now, each of these subtypes adds another layer of information, right? So if we're slightly over acid, that means that she is more likely to be over acid than if she was just plain clear blue eyes. When we add the uric acid, we add another layer of being even more acidic with a really strong kidney undercurrent that the kidneys don't want to do their job all the way. They want to let uric acid accumulate in the body. Now, uric acid can also tie back to the liver. That's a little bit more of an advanced concept. And so we also have the hydrogenoid, which is this stuff coming around here. And this tells us that her lymphatic system wants to be congested. So we're adding all of these layers of information up. She wants to have too much acid. She wants to have uric acid buildup. She wants to have a lymphatic system that is congested. Her skin, as we see through this very thin scurfrim, doesn't want to offload its acids properly either, okay? So each of these, again, gives us a bigger picture, a more detailed picture of what we need to work on and how we need to work on it. So here again, there's our over acid. There's our scurfrim. There's our hydrogenoid. And here we've got some interesting things. This is layer number 4. This is about the structure. So we're literally looking at how are the fibers of the iris laid out. Now we're not looking at color anymore. Before we were looking at, we've got white, we've got sort of a pale yellow, we've got no color in a scurfrim. That was our subtypes by color. Now we're looking at subtypes by structure. So we see here that we have lots of these shapes in her eyes, leaf or petal shapes. So we're going to ignore everything we've said about color. We need to set that aside for just a moment. Now we need to choose her structural subtype. We've got a choice of 4. She could be neurogenic, anxiety, tetanic, polyglandular, or connective tissue. And each one of those subtypes has an entirely different way of laying the fiber into the iris. So these eyes are primarily polyglandular. We've got lots of these leafy shapes attached to the collarette, and then I might have to revise that to be connective tissue. She's got a strong polyglandular undercurrent though. So if we've got connective tissue, which we do, we've got lacuna that are not attached to the collarette, and we've got some areas where the fiber is pretty gappy and some areas where it's a little more woven looking. That means she is a mild connective tissue. In here, we've got some fibers that look a little tangled. That puts her towards connective tissue. And that means that her physical structure is going to need some love, ongoing love and support. Now, she's always been very physically active. She was a competitive figure skater and a dancer in her younger years, and she then became a figure skating coach, and she still dances. And she's got some problems with her ankle, for instance, and things like that that may require surgery. So the fact that she is physically active is good, and her diet's pretty good, but there's still room for improvement, right? I keep saying that. She's the polyglandular undercurrent, where we've got all of these lacunae that are attached to the collarette, tells us that she might have more of a risk of hormonal imbalances. Right? She might have an inherent risk. She did not do anything to put these markings here. She didn't do anything to set up the way her fibers are sitting in her eyes. This is genetic. This is what's been passed down through the generations to her. When we see this polyglandular subtype with these leaf shapes attached to the collarette that's coming around here, the collarette's really absent in many areas of her eye. It's not as clear as we would like it to be. It tells us again that we need to be looking at her diet and her lifestyle to understand her energy struggles, right? She said she doesn't have a lot of energy. She wants more energy. That is often an endocrine problem, and this is all about endocrine, right? So we need to ask her things like, how well do you heal after an injury? That would be a connective tissue question. What are your hormone and or energy levels doing? Is she postmenopausal? Does she find if she doesn't eat on time that she gets a little bit loopy or a little bit lightheaded or a little shaky? Does she find that if she doesn't eat on time, she'll really crave the sweets and the carbs or fruit? Some people will eat fruit thinking it's great for them, but if they're overeating it, it's not any better than eating a chocolate bar. So she is postmenopausal. So again, those questions need to circle around that. How was it going through menopause? How is she now? Does she have any hot flashes? Any other symptoms of the reproductive hormones being not what they should be considering her age? So we're getting all of these questions from her symptoms and looking at her eyes. The next layer we're going to look at today is pigment. So this is anything that is not the base color of the iris. The color of the pigment teaches us which organ or organs inherently want to be out of balance. We could have extra patches of white or yellow or orange or rust or brown or red or black in an eye. And as a pigment, that's going to teach us information. Now, there's a huge difference between the black that we see here and a black pigment. The black that we're seeing in here is the shadow of looking between fibers. Pigment is like this. It's an extra color sitting on the surface of the eye, not a shadow in the depth of the iris. Does that make sense? The difference between pigment and shading or shadow? If that makes sense, give me shading in the chat box. What you are getting here is a highlights tour, like a really super high level highlights tour of about the first 5 lessons in the dynamic iridology course. Excellent, Carol. Thank you for putting shading in there. Really appreciate it. So in this eye, we see this color of pigment, this color, and we've got a little bit here too. And we've got a tiny little bit here, just ever such a little bit. This says that the pancreas wants to run the show. What does the pancreas do? Who can tell me what some of the jobs of the pancreas are? I'm hoping a few more of you have answers. There, Carol's got it again. It controls insulin. Yep. And what else does it do? So it puts out insulin in response to blood sugars. Any ideas? The insulin job is 2% of what the pancreas does. The other 98% is releasing enzymes via the common bile duct into the duodenum to complete the digestion of carbohydrates. Yes, Carol, it helps digest carbs. Good job. And to neutralize the acidity of the contents that are being released from the stomach into the duodenum. There's also enzymes in there that can help with fat digestion and a little bit with protein digestion. So when we see that she's got pancreas pigments, pancreas colored pigments, we know that the pancreas wants to be not as effective as we'd like it to be. So we've got two things that are teaching us that pancreas could be a troublemaker. First is she's polyglandular, right? That's all of these lacunae, these leaf shapes that are attached to the collarette. That can be an indication of endocrine imbalance and further down the road, blood sugar imbalance. And we've got the pancreas pigment here. So we've got two things saying pancreas, yeah, not going to be happy here. So in order to somehow her pancreas is doing its job, which is great, probably because she's making decent food choices. And that's what's keeping her hemoglobin A1C in a healthy range. But her cholesterol and triglycerides are elevated. And that can be related to the diet and the pancreas, along with a few other things. If I'd started seeing her 5 or 10 years ago, I would have started coaching her on pancreas support back then in order to try to keep her cholesterol and triglycerides from going out of balance. You know, everyone, particularly from the medical world, when they think about cholesterol, they think about using statin drugs, right? Which is like putting an ambulance at the bottom of the hill instead of putting a safety rail at the top of the hill, right? By getting in there with the right kinds of diet to support the pancreas, we can help to keep the carbs in check and then, support the liver as needed. We can keep the carbs in check, which can keep the cholesterol and triglycerides in check well before we need the ambulance that was parked at the bottom of the hill. So that was level layer 4 or 5. I don't remember. I've lost count. The next layer we want to check out for her specifically is her digestive and intestinal zones. And so in her eyes, they're very compressed. This ring is pushing against this ring. And that tells me that her intestinal tract is very compressed, very tight, and we don't have a lot of room in the intestinal tract. So we've got several indicators in here that we want to pay attention to. So first off, we want to ask some questions. Are you burpy? Are you farty? Are the foods you've learned to avoid because they don't sit well? And then we want to look and see that we've got a very rough edge here and a very definite, solid kind of ring in here. These things tell us that she probably doesn't digest her protein well. Protein is critical for keeping blood sugar stable. It's not just about carbs and insulin, it's about protein as well. So with her, we are going to need to do some dietary work. Her diet's not bad, but we need to make sure she's getting at least 25 grams of protein in that morning smoothie within the first 30 to 45 minutes of getting out of bed in the morning. We need to encourage her to get off the coffee. And in doing those things, that's exactly what I did. We pumped up her protein, gave her help digesting it, got her off the coffee, and her energy is coming back beautifully. With that taken care of, she was able to see other symptoms she wanted help with. And we are continuing to work together on those issues as we continue to craft a healthier diet and lifestyle with her step by step, instead of in one overwhelming fell swoop. So the first recommendations, again, were get off the coffee, increase her protein, get her some protein digesting supplements to help reduce the amount of acid she would create from all the protein she was eating. Now, we don't always need to go to an iris map to help our clients. And I didn't go to a map at all here. Did you notice that? I didn't isolate any specific organs. I was able to work constitutionally. That means to work with the whole body rather than dissecting any one little thing down to its finest details. The map should be the last step in an iris assessment if we need to use it at all. Nitpicking all of these other details is a waste of time. I promise you it is. If your client's not concerned about what's going on in here, if she doesn't have a symptom here, she's not going to be concerned, at least not in her first few appointments. Once we get that foundation laid of the first few appointments, addressing her concerns, getting her some progress, then we could come in and say, tell me about the family history of, we could start mapping. Tell me about the family history of, in this case, throat and thyroid problems. Anyone have throat or thyroid problems in your family? I've kind of got it in both eyes, right? And so we could then start working preemptively with some of these other areas where she doesn't have current symptoms. We also need to remember that every time we see our client, we should be looking at their iris photos. If we've got a camera, we take the photos, we upload them to our computer, we keep them, and we should be looking at those photos in every appointment. It's not because the eyes will change. Of course, if you're taking the photos, they're not going to change. Even if we were to repeat the photos taking the photos every appointment, they would not change as a result of what we've done. We won't erase a pancreas pigment. We won't eliminate a lacuna. We won't get rid of any tophi. Those are genetically there. They are there to stay. But we can watch for new things that are building in the eye, new things that are being activated, that are showing up in the eyes, that will help us know where we need to work next. So the key here is to get results for the client. It's not about changing their eyes. It's about helping them feel better. Do you agree with that? That the ultimate result should be the client feels better. The client has regained their health. Does that sound like it's where you want to head? Carol says, love this. Thank you for that, Carol. Yeah, that's what I used to do this with the ginseng and wanting the eyes to change. And when they didn't change, it was very frustrating. And yet I knew my clients were doing the homework. So why were the eyes not changing? Because they won't change from supplements or diet. So there you have it. Layers of an iris assessment. Even with all my chit-chatting and explanations, that took us less than 30 minutes because I spent 10 minutes at the beginning introducing the topic. Right, so about 25 minutes to do the assessment, ask the questions, and create a protocol. In a 1-hour appointment, that's going to leave me 35 minutes to continue mentoring my client and building rapport. So how quick and easy was that? There's no need to go into every marking, assigning problems to each of them. That's the old Jensen way. It's not effective. Love Jensen, not in love with the old ways. And again, there's no need to create a solution for everything we see in the iris because everything is connected. With this person, if I strengthen the stomach by taking away coffee and by adding some digestive supports, that's going to help her digest her proteins better. That's going to take pressure off the kidneys. That's going to keep her from building too much acid in her body, which is then going to allow us to begin clearing mucus out of her lymphatic system while we are building her energy. I didn't need a supplement for every little thing I see in her eyes or a recommendation for every little thing to get her where she wanted to go, right? How does that feel? How does that feel? Those of you who've been silent for this last 40 minutes, 35 minutes, how does that feel? Carol says, you make it look so easy. Carol, by the time I'm done with you, young lady, it will be easy for you, right? It's just practice. It's the most important thing you can bring into the program is a college level anatomy and physiology course. If you understand how the body works, which Carol did, if you understand how the body works, I can teach you the markings, and I can teach you how to connect the dots, how to go from one place to another, to end up at the root, to be able to create an effective protocol, right? Jennifer says, that sounds amazing. Yeah, that is what it's all about. Getting results for your clients without you spending hours writing reports, and doing an assessment in a way that you can then communicate that to your clients in a way that makes sense to them. I have lots of clients that bring me in their medical labs. They have no idea what those labs are all about. The doctor might have explained them, but explained them in medical terms. So my clients bring me their labs to go through to help them understand in layman's terms. And that's what we have to do with iridology. We have to be able to explain it to our clients in layman's terms. And that is not meant as an insult. It is meant to be honest and communicative with them. The more we can help them to understand what we see and what the recommendations are and why they're important, the better compliance we get and the better results we get, right? So important. So the next dynamic iridology program is starting on November 28th. Registration is open. And if you have that college level anatomy and physiology already under your belt, and you're looking for a way to learn iridology, you're looking for an instructor who will teach you through live webinars like this, who will mentor you for the long term to help you get really confident with this, then I put a link in the chat box. Schedule a time to chat with me. Let's talk about your goals. Let's talk about what you want to do with it. And let's see if this is a good fit. Carol, thank you for that. She says, Judith's course is amazing. Definitely worth your time. Thank you so much, Carol. I love it when my students show up unasked and say nice things. It's really, really great. So when you go to this website that I posted a link for, you're going to find more information about the dynamic iridology course, but you'll also see buttons there that will let you schedule a time to speak with me to get your questions about the course answered. And again, as we're talking, if it looks like this is going to be a good fit for you, I will offer you the opportunity to get enrolled, right? And that's that. Any questions on what we've talked about? Don't make them too hard. I've already had a long day and I still have to teach another 2 hours tonight. I'm just kidding. I'm teasing you, but I'm not kidding. I really do have to teach another class tonight. Anything that I can answer for you right now? All right. Even if I've already had a call with you, if you are considering enrolling and you're thinking the November start date is for you, make a note of that link or just click it right now and open the window. Let's have another conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's get you enrolled. With that, my friends, have a brilliant evening. Thank you for making time to be with me today. I truly appreciate it. And I will see you again soon. Bye for now.